Hello everyone, welcome back to another Star Wars Destiny video. Yesterday Fantasy Flight released their article on yellow cards for Empire at War. We're going to take a quick look at them. Some of them we have already seen, as far as like other spoilers that were open. Some of these were opened at Nova, some of them were partially spoiled before. But we're just going to go ahead and start taking a look at the cards. First up here, we have Cad Bane. He was partially spoiled at Gen Con. He had a die. His die was covering some of his action abilities. So 12 health, 13 or 17 points, 2 range, 3 range for a resource, 2 discard for a resource, shield resource blank. As an action, play an upgrade from your hand on this character, paying its cost, then you may activate him. So let's say you throw a holdout blaster on him. I believe you're going to get 2 actions for it because his action is to play an upgrade on him. So you pay your 2 resources, you play your holdout blaster, you activate him, and then you still have the holdout blaster's ambush action left over, so you can go ahead and maybe resolve some damage. You can also play, for example, fast hands on him, roll him out, and then with fast hands, immediately resolve one of the dice. Very good health, so 12 health, 13, 17, so he pairs well with the new Phasma from the 2-player game. So 17, 13, you can do that. And they all have range damage. He's got a resource on his die, so you can bait and switch into one of his other damage sides. So either his 2 or his 3 for a resource. I think he's going to be pretty interesting. I don't really care like the fact that he's got 2 pay sides, but it kind of makes sense because he's a mercenary. Essentially, you're going to have to kind of pay. You're going to have to pay him to do some of these things, kind of like the hired guns in Awakenings, where all their damage sides were resource costed sides. But good health, good points, compare well with, it looks like, a variety of other characters. I think I'm most interested in trying him with new Phasma. We'll see how it goes when the game comes out. But that is Cad Bane. We're going to move into our next card. Next up, we have Houndstooth. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this card because I've discussed it a couple times before, but now we have a more clear version of the card and what it looks like. So 2 resources, yellow villain support vehicle, 1 disrupt, 1 shield, 3 shields for a resource, 2 resources for a resource, or 4 resources for 2 resources. And after you activate the support, you may remove one of your yellow character dice to gain a resource. So remove a character, get a resource. If you're playing yellow-red, works well with Ruthless Tactics, so you pay the 2 resources. You then essentially get 6 because you get the 4, and then you get whatever the resource cost is as well. So you would get 6 resources for the cost of 2. Could be pretty cool. 2 resources to get this out. And if you're playing like an Unkar deck where you just have a lot of resources, you can make a lot more resources off of this. It also shields characters, can disrupt. So if you're playing yellow-red with Imperial Inspection, you roll this out, you have a chance of rolling that disrupt side. So that is the Houndstooth. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have Lando Calrissian. Again, same with the Houndstooth. Not going to spend a ton of time on Lando because I've talked about him before. This is just a better-looking version of the card. So we have 11 health, yellow hero, 13, 16 for his points, 1 range, 1 focus, 2 discard for a resource, 3 resources for 1 resource, and you start the game with 1 additional resource. So that could be pretty big. So you start the game with 3, you're able to get out a 3-cost upgrade first round without having to resolve any resources or play any events to get resources. I do wish he had 1 more damage side, but you can put some upgrades on him. We have his gun showing up later in the video, so you can throw that on him and get some more damage out of him as well. So that's Lando Calrissian, Galactic Entrepreneur. I think he'll be interesting just because of his ability to start the game off with an additional resource. Maybe you just run a single Lando at 13, and you basically just use him kind of like as a resource engine. So you pay a resource, you get 3, so you're essentially making 2. You can also get a resource off of him as well. You get resources from him to pay for some of your bigger, more expensive events, upgrades, and supports. So that is Lando. We're going to move into our next card. Next up, we have Chopper. He was partially spoiled at Gen Con. So, hero support droid, run 1 resource, 1 melee damage, disrupt, resource, special, and I imagine a blank. Remove and special remove a die showing a value of 2 or less. So it's essentially an electroshock that you can use kind of whenever you roll it. He is legendary, which I think is it's interesting, but it's also I don't really know if he should be legendary because he is very easily removed from the game. So those EMP grenades can take him out. He's easily sabotaged, so you play sabotage, discard a card to get rid of Chopper. Of course, you can probably get him back from your discard pile if you're playing the right events or right locations. Again, I think it's interesting to have basically an electroshock that you can kind of trigger almost whenever you want, especially if you have something like cunning or something that'll let you flip dice to specials and things like that. So like meditate or something like that. If you're playing blue yellow, you can remove a blank, focus Chopper into a special, and then remove an opponent's special or opponent's die valued at 2 or less. But again, he's easily my concern is that he's easily removable with things like sabotage or any like the ATSC special or anything that can just get rid of supports or have them get discarded. So that's Chopper. I think he'll be interesting just because of that special, but we're just going to have to wait and see. So that comes out tomorrow, so hopefully I'll be able to start doing some deck building and see what I can actually come up with. But we're going to move into our next card. Next up, we have the Energy Slingshot. We talked a little bit about this card from the Nova spoilers. So, yellow hero upgrade weapon, 1 resource, 1 range, 1 range, disrupt, discard blank, and after you resolve this die, you may spend a resource to re-roll it instead of removing it from your pool. So essentially, this is Ezra's little Energy Slingshot, and I like the or after you resolve it, you can spend the resource to re-roll it. So it's essentially like you're firing the slingshot once, you're reloading it, firing it again, firing it again, and firing it again. So that is the Energy Slingshot. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have Tough Haggler. Yellow hero upgrade ability, 3 resources, 2 disrupt, 1 resource, plus 2 resource, special blank, and special is look at an opponent's hand and choose 2 cards in it. Then discard those cards unless that opponent spends 2 resources. So some decent sides here. So you have the 2 disrupt on there to get rid of resources to prevent them from even being able to spend the 2 resources to save the cards in their hand. You have a resource, a plus 2 resource, and then again 2 specials. And being able to look at first of all, you get to look at your opponent's hand. You get to then choose 2 cards in it and have them discard it unless they spend 2 resources. So they come into a choice where it's like, okay, here's my hand. You choose the 2 cards. And then let's say, okay, I want to save those cards. They spend 2 resources, but now that they spent those resources, they might not have the resources needed to spend on actually playing those cards. So it'll probably, delay the game a little bit to where they can maybe eventually get those resources back and then play those events or upgrades or whatever they are. I see this as being a key in a lot of like control decks because you're disrupting the resources with the die to begin with, and then you have 2 chances to hit that special. So you have 2 specials on the die, which then will let you look at their hand and discard 2 cards. So could work in a mill deck because you're getting rid of cards in their hand if they don't spend those resources. And even if they do spend the resources, they may not then have the resources needed to play those cards. So that is Tough Haggler. We're going to move into our next card. Next up, we have the LL30 Blaster Pistol. Yellow villain upgrade weapon, 2 resources, 1 range damage, 1 range damage, plus 2 range damage, shield, special blank, ambush, and redeploy. So very nice, kind of like a holdout blaster essentially. Turn another one of your dice to a side showing range damage as its special. So 3 damage sides, none of them having resource costs on them. And then the special, which lets you turn another one of your dice to a side showing range damage. So if you can cheat this out to where you can get multiple actions, you can use a special, turn a die to another side showing range damage, and then resolve a bunch of range damage. So essentially Cad Bane's pistol. I like that it has ambush, it has redeploy. 3 damage sides with none of them being resource costed, as well as a special that lets you roll the blank on one of your other dice. You can just turn it to a side showing range damage. Just says another die, so any die beside this die. So if you have this on Cad and you roll him out and he rolls a blank, can use the special on this to turn his die to one of his damage sides. I think this could be a pretty good weapon. I'm looking forward to maybe running this in my Aura Sing Balatik deck or Aura Sing Django deck. Not sure who I would put it on. Maybe one on each. Maybe both on. Maybe both of them on Aura. You know, roll her out with fast hands, pump out some damage. Next turn, come back around, resolve her other die and this pistol, or something like that. Or put this on Django, roll him out, then resolve damage. Later, resolve the special, flipping another one of his dice to a damage side, and things like that. So that is the LL30 Blaster Pistol. We're going to move into our next card. Next up, we have the X8 Night Sniper, a neutral yellow weapon upgrade, 2 resources, 1 range damage, 3 range damage for a resource, plus 2 range damage, disrupt, resource, blank, has ambush, so you get that extra action after you play it, and as an action, you can spend the resource to turn this die to any side. So if you roll a blank, you can spend the resource to flip it into one of its damage sides, maybe its modified side. Maybe you rolled a blank on this and rolled range damage on the character that it's attached to, and you don't have the resource to spend on the three damage side, so you can spend the resource, flip this to the +2, and then later resolve all that damage. It's legendary, so 2-cost gun, 3 damage sides, and as an action, you can basically flip it to any of the sides that you want. So if you want damage, you can get that. If you need a resource, you can get that. I like the damage side, so the 3 for a resource is good. I like that it has a 1, also has a modifier, which could be pretty good as well. And this is essentially the gun that Lando uses, or one of his guns, I should say. Looks like they've got the card here, like on a sabacc table with some cards and some credit chips. But I think this could be a pretty good gun. I like that it's neutral, so I can fit it into both hero and villain decks. So I'm thinking of building, if you like, maybe this would be a new gun for Han to use. Play this early, later overwrite it with, play it on Han, get his shield from his ability. Later overwrite it with the DL44, get another shield, take another action because both of those guns will have ambush. I think this could slot into a lot of different decks, so I'm interested in seeing how it plays out. We're going to move into our next card. And next up, we have Anarchy, Yellow Villain Event, 3 resources. Remove one of your yellow dice, then deal damage to each of an opponent's characters equal to the value showing on that die. So we talked a little bit about the Houndstooth earlier and how it has the 4 resources for 2 resource sides. So let's say you're playing Ukkar Jabba or something like that. You roll out Houndstooth, and you land on that 4 resource side. You then, if you have 3 resources, pay 3 resources, play Anarchy, remove the Houndstooth, and then hit all of your opponent's characters for 4 damage. It's not unblockable damage, so it can still be absorbed with shields and force illusion and that kind of stuff. But definitely a way to make use of some of those higher valued supports or dice that just have very high costs on them. I'm glad they made this yellow die only though, because so at least you're not going to be able to remove an ATST with this or any other huge thing like the Sonic Cannon or anything like that. So you remove that. If you remove the Sonic Cannon, you could be doing 6 damage to each character, which would just be insane. It'd be totally crazy. But this, you have to remove a yellow. There are still some yellow dice that have fairly good values on them. You can remove a Slave 1. You can remove Houndstooth. You can remove, let's say Ukkar has a +2. You can remove his +2 and do 2 damage to everybody and things like that. It's pretty flexible depending on what you want to do, but you want to use it with a die that probably has a value of 3 or more just to make it more effective. If you do it with a die value 3 or more, you're essentially turning it into a thermal detonator and then maybe getting more damage out of it depending on if you're using like a 4 cost or a 5, not a 4 cost, but a die value of 4, 5, maybe even higher than that. But that is Anarchy. We're going to move into our next card. Next up, we have Bounty Postings, Yellow Villain Event, 1 resource. Draw cards equal to the number of cards an opponent has. So if you're getting milled out or you're just playing a lot of events, discarding a lot for rerolls and things like that, you can pay a resource and then draw up to whatever they have. It's kind of not quite like Boundless Ambition, but because that lets you drop to your maximum hand size, this will allow you to draw up to whatever your opponent has. So if your opponent is just drawing a ton of cards, you can pay a resource and get as many cards as they have. Or again, if you were very low on cards and they have like a full hand and you have just two, pay a resource and draw three cards. So definitely a way to get through your deck faster, get to your your good upgrades, your good events, and things like that. And it also depends on how many cards your opponent has. So if you're building that, if you don't want to use it, obviously, if have less, or if they have less than you, because you're not gonna be able to draw anything. But with this, if they have like again 6 cards in their hand for some reason, let's say they're playing Luke and they're constantly drawing cards, you can pay that resource and then draw whatever up to whatever they have in their hand. So if I have 2 and they have 6, I get to draw 4. That's pretty good for one resource. So that is bounty postings. We're going to move into our next card. Next up, we have Tenacity. Yellow hero event, 3 resources. Play only if an opponent has more characters than you. Exhaust one of that opponent's characters. So expensive at 3. I think this would have been better at 2. However, the effect is pretty strong because you're basically not going to be able to roll that character out that whole round if it gets exhausted, unless they have ways to, like leadership, essentially exhaust a unique red character to unexhaust the character that you exhausted with Tenacity. But if you're playing, let's say you're playing, I think I can see this playing well in a Jin Urso deck because it'll drop it to 2. Let's say you're playing Jin Commando, and you're playing against a 3-character deck. You can basically, on your first turn, pay 2 resources, play Tenacity, and exhaust one of their characters. Or if your Rebel Commando got defeated, or Jin got defeated, and you have 1 character left, they have 2, you can still play this and exhaust one of their characters, and then make it be a more even fight, I suppose. When it's going to be 1 character versus 1 character instead of 2 of their characters versus 1 of yours. I see this as kind of being like a last ditch effort kind of thing. I don't see people playing this like early in the game, but I can see this going like like late game, throw this out, exhaust one of their characters, so you can just roll in, deal enough damage possibly to that character to defeat it, and then they'll just be left with the 1 character that they have that's still ready, that kind of thing. So that is Tenacity. We're going to move into our next card. And finally, for our last card, we have Impersonate. 2 resources, yellow hero event. Move damage among your characters as you wish. This ignores shields, and you cannot exceed a character's health while moving this damage around. So a good way to keep damage off of certain characters. So let's say, again, this might work with Poe Maz. If Poe's about to be defeated, you can move damage from Poe to Maz. You can move it from Maz to Poe, for example. Keep whatever character is about to be defeated from possibly being defeated. So in Poe Maz, I was running Draw Attention and Field Medic. I would maybe consider dropping Draw Attention, maybe putting this in, because this just lets you move damage. So you can just move it almost as much damage as you want. You can even have Maz with Second Chance on her, move enough damage onto Maz to defeat her, pop Second Chance, and then heal back 5. So Impersonate could be a very good card, like late game, trying to just make it so your characters don't get defeated long enough so that you can actually still win the game. Could be a pretty good card. We're gonna just have to wait and see. Empire at War will be coming out tomorrow. I'll be probably trying to get at least a box, hopefully 2, and going to be doing at least 1 unboxing video, hopefully tomorrow. Watch for that. But that's going to do it for this video. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.